And then the third thing is events. The in-person conversation. Elected officials or other policy makers up on a stage, an audience of people who they represent, directly or indirectly, watching, being grilled on the record by a journalist, asking hard questions about the choices that they make, the votes they cast, the budgets they passed, the policies and the stances that they've embraced. And then giving the audience the opportunity to ask questions as well. Accountability journalism of the old school, holding people in power accountable for what they do and do not do, for what they do and do not believe, and how that impacts you. That's something that we thought from the very beginning, Becky, it was going to be a part of our giving people the means to access this stuff and to be more civically engaged. So we started out doing events in the very early part of 2010, not long after the Tribune launched. And right now we do on average one event per week around the state, 50 events a year. About half in Austin, but about half of them outside of Austin in the kind of places you don't go by accident. Nacogdoches, Canyon, Huntsville. We almost always go to college campuses, which are the last remaining public squares in these communities. We bring elected officials, both elected officials who represent that community and people who don't, and policymakers onto a campus over the lunch hour, and we have a conversation about the future of criminal justice policy, or water, or transportation. And we typically turn out a couple hundred people, and it's free to attend. Only the Big Texas Tribune Festival is ticketed. Every other event we do all year long is open to the public, on the record, and free. Plus, we provide lunch. We lose money on the deal, although we don't. Come back to that in a second. And we live stream every event we do. So if you're not there, you can watch it on your phone or on your computer. And then we post video after the fact. Sponsorship pays the freight. This year, we will do more than $1.5 million in revenue associated with events, out of a total of $6.5 million that we'll raise. That revenue helps to pay for all the journalism that we produce. And it is totally on mission to do those events. We're not doing bridal shows or barbecue festivals. There's a place for those kinds of events. Other media companies do those kinds of events. We do editorial events. We do events that are in keeping with the kind of work that we do. It generates money, brand awareness, audience engagement, content. We make news and we break news at these events. But we also make money, and it allows us to do all this kind of stuff. So I think it's become a very important part of our, and I frankly think that more news organizations have an opportunity to get into that business if they only allow themselves to see the value of it.
How difficult or easy has it been to get attendance? I mean, did you?
Well, attendance, I think over time, Becky, attendance has gotten to be better because people now know what they come to expect a certain kind of program from us. And so, look, 27 million people in the state, 19 million adults, not everybody digs this stuff. I get that. We don't need everybody to love it. We just need enough, right? So a couple hundred turn out in Nacogdoches, or a couple hundred turn out in Canyon or McAllen, or, you know, we did a day-long symposium on the intersection of demographics and public policy and politics on the UTEP campus in El Paso. Last year we had 400 turn out during the day. You know, I love an audience of that size. That's great. That's plenty. And then the elected officials, they all say yes, or if they can say yes, they do, in part because they realize it's good to have that kind of a conversation in their communities. Selfishly, everybody in politics is an egomaniac, that's fine. So they like the opportunity to be up on stage, kind of being the one. And they also, I think, to some degree, are playing defense. Because if you're asked to appear in front of your voters, oh, I'm too busy to go, you know, that gets out in like 1 second. Well, what's at least, no, Mr. Fancy won't come and speak before an audience of the people that represent him. Well, they can't say no, really, in many cases. So it's a really great confluence of things, and I think it's journalism. Events are journalism. So we love that part of what we do.
This sounds kind of like we will build it, they will come, sort of. You
know, I think you have to take, look, this whole business, this whole operation of the Tribune has been built on faith, right? I mean, you know, we didn't know this would work. And I continue to be surprised every day. You know, just like I wake up every day and I think, well, surely today's the day Donald Trump will be gone. Turns out I'm wrong every day when I wake up. Every day I wake up and I say, well, now, finally, this great run we've had will come to an end, because I tend to be paranoid and pessimistic because I'd rather be pleasantly surprised. So I wake up every day thinking, well, today's the day. You know, surely today's the day the whole thing will go. And in the same way, I kind of go, oh, no, I guess not.
So you guys are also doing political trivia nights?
Well, we've done one. We're going to do
Okay.
another one. Yeah, look, this has become a thing out in the world. What we are, we're really building a community more than an audience. And the community has shared interests. People want to nerd out on this stuff. And I think there is an audience for that kind of an event. It's fun, You drink beer, you answer questions about which land commissioner was indicted in Texas in the 30s. If that floats your boat, great. There apparently are enough people who are interested in that stuff, and it's just another way to get people in the tent. There is no one right way to do this. There are a million wrong ways. In life, there are a million wrong ways to do things. There's no one right way. It just has to be a right way. And I think in our case, our approach to building this audience has come through a lot of experimentation, iteration. Try a bunch of things. Some will work, some won't work. If they don't work, learn from what didn't work, move on. If they do work, try them again. We had an instinct that trivia night would work, and it worked. So we're going to try it again. We'll see.
My last question before we
Sure.
open it up. Do you think that this kind of vertical niche marketing, is this the future? Do you need to specialize in this way to succeed?
I don't know that you have to. I think there's been a demand for it here and a lack of supply, and so it was a ripe environment for us to do this. Everybody comes down here and says, how do we take what the Tribune has done and export it to where we are, our city, our state? Internationally, we have people come in all the time and say, how do we take this nonprofit model and approach our home country or our home city the same way you've approached Texas? There are aspects of it that are exportable. There are things that can be emulated, but I think Texas is different. We have an environment, a climate here that, from a political standpoint, is much more interesting than I think a lot of other places. I don't think that you would have nearly the content available to you that you have here in a place like Idaho or Vermont. Those are perfectly nice states, but we in Texas tend to drive the national conversation on a whole bunch of public policy stuff. Our politicians they're just that much more interesting, I think the economics of this state, we have the most millionaires and billionaires of any state. We have the third highest number of Fortune 500 companies and the most Fortune 1000 companies. If you're going to raise money from individuals and corporations as well as foundations as a nonprofit to support an organization like this, it helps to have some to raise money. I think that everybody has to figure out what works for them. Part of what has been great about this is that it's not cookie cutter. When we partnered with the New York Times originally, and they wanted us to be one of their regional partners, our stories, our journalists, there was something smart about that, because the worst thing that you can do in this state is explain as a hate more than having non-Texans explain Texas to them. And I think it's got to be authentic. There's got to be a certain amount of authenticity to what you produce. And so for us, Texans, and if somebody wants to run a play like this in their community, they really have to think about it in terms of their community. What's appropriate for them will be appropriate for them.
All right, let's take some questions. Oh.
I want to. I am what Donald Trump would refer to as a little low energy today. I'm sort of in the Texas Tribune Festival coma, but I promise to try to respond enthusiastically and energetically to all. Yeah.
So I was reading that you interviewed Walter Cronkite once.
I did.
and I couldn't find the video of it. I just want to know, like, how did that go?
It exists. So I'll send it to you. It was really good. So Cronkite was, I think, 88, or he was near the end of his life. I seem to have some reason to think he was 88, but maybe he wasn't exactly. Covered from the moon that was named for him. It was like the Cronkite Rock, and for some reason it was at UT, and he came down to be presented with this Cronkite Rock that had come from the moon. And so we knew he was coming, and so we said, well, hell, he's coming. Let's do it. I do a public television interview program. Well, let's interview Cronkite. So Cronkite came and did the thing, and then he was waiting between the ceremony and the interview, and again, he's like 88. And he fainted. He like, bam, hit the ground. And so I thought, well, this is not going to go. I mean, I hope he's well, but I then thought, because it's all about me, I thought, well, this interview is not going to go very well because Cronkite just passed that. So no, he's okay, he's okay. I had met Mr. Cronkite in New York a couple of years before, and he was very frail and deaf as a post. And I thought, I don't exactly know how this is going to work. I'm going to be shouting at him, questions at him. And he's obviously not in terribly good health. So how's this going to go? And it was the most extraordinary thing I'd ever seen. So they get Cronkite, full house. They get Cronkite in the chair, and they had to put earpieces in his ear to have my questions amplified because he really is like terribly hard. It was terribly hard to hear. So they put the earpieces in, and he's sort of slumped over. And then the camera comes on, and I swear to God, he just like sprung to life. I think that for people, I don't know this, I'm on television to some degree a lot, but not nearly as much as people who really make a living at this. I think for some people who are on television, they sort of conserve their energy, like they're in low battery power mode, right? They conserve their energy, and when the camera comes on, it has this thing. It just sort of brings them to life. And so he was actually amazing, and it was amazing to talk to him. This is a guy who forgets every day more than most of us ever learn about journalism, right, at that time. And he was amazing. It was really fun to talk to him, who wouldn't, it's like talking to Galileo or something, it's like who wouldn't want to have the opportunity to do that? Now, different people have different Galileos. Like who you might be really psyched to talk to might not be who I'm psyched to talk to. I think generally speaking, if you're in journalism, you get the opportunity to talk to Walter Cronkite. That's great. In the last 5 days, I've interviewed the novelist Margaret Atwood, the actor who played Bunk on The Wire, John Sununu, who was the governor of New Hampshire and was White House chief of staff for George H.W. Bush, Julian Castro, the former mayor of San Antonio, who may be Hillary Clinton's vice presidential ticket running mate, and Elvis Costello. I'm pretty much, my box for the week is pretty much checked, right? Elvis Costello is as much my Cronkite as actual Cronkite, right? So I always am excited to have the opportunity to do it, whatever I do. Cronkite in that case was awesome, and I was just glad that his health was long enough to be able to have an opportunity.
Hello, I'm Jasmine Gregory.
Hi.
I'm actually a mass comm and journalism major. I was wondering, what is the best piece of advice you can give to an aspiring journalist?
What is the best piece of advice I give to an aspiring journalist? I think that you need to constantly be reading across platforms and be aware of the world around you as a result of that. The nature of journalism and the expectations for somebody who either is or wants to be a journalist is that you have some base of knowledge. We're in the business of knowing what's going on, and we're in the business of sharing facts, right? That's like the building blocks of our business. Knowledge and accuracy, facts. If you're not curious about the world around you enough to be aware of what's going on, then to my mind, you're not serious about being a journalist. Because what is a journalist? A journalist is somebody who finds things out and tells everybody about it. Now, they may tell them about it in a normal, straightforward, traditional way, or they tell them about it in a really creative and innovative and unexpected way. But the point is, journalism is about telling people, these things are going on, here's what's going on, here's why it matters. And that begins with you yourself being knowledgeable. Last thing I do at night before I go to bed, first thing I do when I wake up in the morning is look at Twitter. Twitter is the Associated Press wire of our generation. The generation that's bounded by you on the low end and me on the high end, chronologically, or from an age standpoint. I want to know what's going on. I don't want to be, somebody calls me and say, hey, did you hear blank, and have my response be no. Right? So, Joe Biden is not running for president. Paul Ryan is going to be speaker. Hillary Clinton's been dragged before this committee today. These are kind of things that, if you're a serious journalist, if you're somebody who wants to be a journalist, and I tell you that Joe Biden announced that he's not running for president, you said, really? My response is, you're not paying enough attention to the world around you. So that would be my strongest bit of advice.
Thank you.
Hope that's helpful. Hi.
Hello, I'm a public relations major, and I was actually wondering, as a nonprofit, what's been your most challenging opportunity, I guess, and also what has been your favorite way to reach a community?
Favorite way to
Reach to a community?
reach community. So I'm going to give you two answers on the biggest challenge as a nonprofit. The biggest challenge has been figuring out as a journalist that I also am comfortable with and can even be pretty good at raising money. For a lot of us in journalism, the idea is journalism. Business is bad. We don't like the business of our business. We don't want to have to worry about how this gets paid for. We don't want to have to know about all that. Get over yourself. Revenue is not evil. Business is not evil. It is the thing that enables the good work that you do. Too many people in our business are still allergic to the business of our business. Stop. That's so last century. That's so last set of thinking about journalism. And so one of the biggest challenges for me has been letting my inner business person out. We all have one. We just don't know it. And so I've been very integral in the process of building the economic model, and I've spent a lot of time myself raising money because I believe in the work we do, and I can sell the importance of the work we do to people who might provide the resources to do it, individuals, foundations, and corporations. And so that's been a very big challenge. Another big challenge on the nonprofit side, and I confess to being a little mystified by this, but I've stopped focusing on how mystified I am and just have dealt with the reality of it, is that people hold us to, I think, a higher standard than the for-profit end of our business when it comes to assumptions that somehow there are inherent conflicts of interest in the economic and content models. So I worked for a magazine for years and years that took advertising. No one ever said to me in all those years, well, how do I know that your advertisers aren't impacting the integrity of your journalism? How do I know that you're not making journalistic decisions based on who pays your bills? Nobody ever assumes that about the for-profit media. Now, there may be specific instances in which people go, well, wait a minute, that's weird. But as a general conversation topic, people don't come to work every day going, how are we going to defend ourselves against charges that there's a conflict inherent in the work we do? Not only from day one, but from day zero, before we even launched, we were getting questions about how we were going to mediate these conflicts. People give you money and then you write journalism. How are you not susceptible to being influenced by the people who fund you? And my response is, in the same way that the magazine I used to run, in the same way that for-profit news organizations all over the world are not susceptible, because they're not. Because journalism with integrity is what you produce. So we have overcorrected by disclosing every single dollar in real time that is donated to the Tribune on our site. So all $33 million or so that has been donated over the 6 years is right there for you to see in the form of disclosures of individual donors, corporate donors, foundation donors. And in every story, we'll have a paragraph at the end. If anybody who is mentioned in a story has any financial relationship with the Tribune, we say, full disclosure, blah, blah, blah. The challenge has been that there are still disbelievers. Well, surely there's something funny going on here. We can't prove it, but we insist that there must be something going on here. And it's like, dude, there's nothing going on. So that's been actually an unexpected challenge, and it's taken up a certain amount of our time over the years is making certain that we're as transparent as possible to hold off any concerns, legitimate or not, that there's that. That's been a big challenge. The best way to reach communities, I really do find, and Becky was kind enough to tee this up, I really do believe that the in-person stuff we do is just so great. You know, we live in a state where redistricting has basically made elections not competitive. The vast majority of elections that happen in a state, you know the winner before the voting even begins, because redistricting has really got a stranglehold on the democracy of this state. So for a lot of these people we go to see in these communities that, frankly, their vote doesn't matter because the person who is in office is going to get reelected next time and is going to get reelected because the way the lines have been drawn, there's really no competition. They don't get the opportunity to hear from their elected officials the way they're going to hear from them on that day. They don't get to ask questions of those people because the game is rigged. They think the game is rigged. Why is voter turnout as low as it is in the state? Because most people think their vote doesn't matter, and they're right. That's not to say that more people shouldn't vote, but if you live in a legislative district that's been redistricted so that it's 75% Republican, you have a Republican office holder, and you happen to be a Democrat who lives in one of these communities, and it can be the reverse with Democratic districts and if you're a Republican. You know the outcome of the election before you go vote. Why would you bother to do it? Why would you waste the gas to drive to the polling place? So I love the idea that we're giving people an opportunity to engage with people who represent them, to talk about issues that matter to them that they wouldn't otherwise have. So I'm bullish on events. Good?
Yes, thank you.
Yep, sir.
My name is Jerry McCarthy. I'm a political science major.
Great.
So I kind of have some questions. I was a big fan. I joined the Navy. Bill Clinton was president then, but I did articles in high school. I wrote reports on your articles.
Great.
So big
Well,
fan.
thanks for your service, too.
I could ask 100 questions.
Great.
But, first, the Boston bombing, right? What's the difference between the guy that shows up at the press conference with his phone to ask the police, chief a question,
Right.
and the journalist standing there with his camera and a microphone?
Well, fundamentally, nothing.
I mean, we get the information from
Right.
the same-
I do think, though, that it is not true that an individual is the same as a news organization, right? I think citizen journalism is legitimate. An individual with a phone wants to ask questions, I'm all for that. I will say that, sort of period, new paragraph. I believe that training standards, there are best practices. And I think that just as I don't like to go into a restaurant and some guy off the street cooks my dinner, I would rather, when I, show up at a news organization's front door, whether it's a literal front door or the web door, I'd like to know that the people who are reporting are people who have some basic understanding of how to tell a story, to gather facts, that I'm being given the straight skinny, that there's no bias, there's no deliberate omissions, that there's no agenda behind it. And so I tend to prefer professional journalism as opposed to amateur journalism or citizen journalism. That's not to say there's not a place for it, but I think it's not only not wrong for citizen who wants to ask an elected official a question with a camera. Not only do I think it's not wrong, I think it's absolutely that person's right.
And then, is it a problem for you that like the Huffington Post says that Donald Trump is entertainment, not politics?
I think that's total bullshit. I think that was such a ridiculous, and then they had to go back on it in like 1 second.
Right, because it turns out he's still here and he's still.
He may very well be president.
Don't say that.
No, I mean, look, he might. As I said, I go to bed every night, wake up in the morning, think today's the day I'm going to wake up, and he will have gone away. He's not going anywhere. It's, the Amy Chozick from the New York Times was down at our Tribune Festival this weekend on this panel about 2016. And she said, people keep saying to me that Donald Trump is a summer fling. I have to remind them it's mid-October. Right? He's leading every poll. Although I gather there's a poll out in Iowa today that has Carson ahead of him. But the point is, he's been leading in every single poll. Entertainment? No. Whatever else he may be entertaining, but he's not entertainment.
Hi, Leslie DeLeon, journalism major.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Leslie DeLeon, journalism
Yes.
major. Hi. So I was wondering, you talked about Texas' unique political culture. Did that inspire the God and Governing Project, and what was your
Did
involvement?
that inspire the God and Governing Project? That's a great question. So what the question is referring to is a documentary series that we produced over a period of months in which we interviewed 23 state legislators and statewide elected officials about the influence of faith in governing. We hear a lot of talk about God these days on the floor of the Texas legislature, and the degree to which decisions being made at the legislature on big public policy issues are being driven by people's faith. They're either using their faith in an offensive way to go, not offensive as in offending you, but they're sort of proactively saying, based on faith, we're going to decide to pass these laws or to embrace these policies, or they're defending policies that maybe their own constituents don't agree with, saying, I look to the Bible as well as the Constitution to tell me what to do. And, you know, good people of decent character and pure hearts can just disagree about this stuff. And of course, there's the matter of the Establishment Clause of the Constitution, which theoretically is supposed to regulate the degree to which the public space can intersect with people's faith. You know, I had a conversation this weekend with, and so yes, I think in a state like Texas, we are the rodeo buckle of the Bible Belt, right? This is absolutely a state in which you're going to have this conversation. And it's a conservative state. A lot of the people elected to state office and to the legislature are people of strong faith who do take that faith as a driver of public policy and politics. It's up to the people who represent them and people who live in the state to decide whether that's good or bad. I had a conversation with the Lieutenant Governor this weekend as part of the Tribune Festival, in which I observed that in his interviews for this project, he said, matter-of-factly, this is a Christian nation. And I asked him if he believed, as has been said many times, this is a Christian state. And he said, yes, it is. I said, well, here's the thing. I'm a Jew. I'm a really bad Jew. I'm like the worst Jew who ever existed, right? I'm practically Episcopalian at this point, right? But I'm a Jew. Should I, as somebody who is not Christian, and some percentage of the state, I think it's 23%, is not Christian. 77% self-identify as some strain of Christian. Of course, within that 77%, different people are Christian to a more aggressive or less aggressive degree. There are people who go to church every Sunday. There are people who go to church sometimes. There are people who may be Christian in name, but they're not practicing, right? So there's a continuum in that 77%. But in the remaining 27%, there are people who self-identify as other faiths, and there are people who are non-believers in this state. I said to the Lieutenant Governor, how should I feel as somebody who is not a Christian living here, being told this is a Christian state? Or this is a Christian nation? Should I feel like there's a place for me here? I think it's a really interesting conversation to have, you know? We have a presidential candidate who said, again, matter-of-factly, a couple of weeks ago, I wouldn't be comfortable with a Muslim being president. You know? I mean, this is a conversation that is a very real conversation in this country and in this state right now. And there is absolutely no question that from a political standpoint, we need to be talking about this, because we have to ask ourselves as a state, are we comfortable with the degree to which the emphasis on faith as a driver of policy is greater today than it's been previously? Are we good with that? Or are we not good?
Hi, my name is
Hi.
Kathleen Stone.
Hi.
Thank you for coming out here. We appreciate it.
I'll go any place that's 25 minutes away. It's fine.
Yeah. Well, you were talking a lot about how innovation is so important in journalism and whatnot. How do you expect the Texas Tribune to continue innovating over the next 5-10 years?
Well, that's the big, you've asked a great question, you know, that's the big challenge. As I said earlier, you know, the shark that does not move forward dies. And I think we are always thinking about what the next thing is and the next thing is and the next thing is. In the last year, for instance, we have put a much greater emphasis on investigative journalism, long-form reporting. This project is part of that effort. I think you're going to see us continue to look for new ways to tell stories, new stories to tell, and new parts of the state for us to spend time. Part of the problem with any news organization in the state of Texas is you go, well, Austin, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, Fort Worth, that's where the action is. The reality is that while the urban areas of the state are growing very quickly, and there are really interesting stories in the urban areas that are microcosms of what's happening at the state level. So public education is a statewide issue, but in every city there are really interesting stories to tell, or transportation, or immigration, or healthcare. As I said earlier, the real energy in the state at the moment from a population change standpoint is in the valley. That's where the population of the state is growing the fastest and changing the most dynamically. We need to be in Brownsville, McAllen, Edinburgh, Harlingen. We need to be in El Paso. We need to be in the places where the future of this state is materializing before our eyes. And we need to understand that this state is different and is going to be ever more different going forward, and that if you simply tell the same old stories in the same old way, you're not accomplishing anything. So innovation for us has to do with how we produce stories and present them, but before even that, it's about what stories we tell and where we tell them.
Thank you.
Good. Anything else? Hi.
Okay, as a journalist, how do you remain unbiased when telling a story?
You know, it's a little bit like the obscenity standard in the Supreme Court. You know it when you see it. I actually believe that bias is people assert that there's bias in journalism, and I say, well, prove it. And they often cite something that they don't like or they don't agree with, and they assume that somehow the person who wrote that is biased. I actually think it is not at all hard to be unbiased. I think that you go in to a newsroom intending to tell a story. That story is a series of facts presented in a compelling and orderly fashion. You don't have your thumb on the scale when you assemble those facts or when you convey them. You don't favor one side or disfavor another side. You make sure that everything is fair, thorough, and accurate. Does that mean that people who are journalists are any different than people who are any other thing? We all have things we like and don't like. We all have people we like and don't like. We all have personal beliefs and preferences. But those likes and dislikes and beliefs and preferences do not impact the work that I do and do not impact the work that people who work for me do. We work very hard to keep bias out of anything that we produce. We don't editorialize on issues. We don't endorse candidates or campaigns. And it really is not all that hard. And when people say to me, how do you keep bias out of your newsroom? My response typically is, do you see bias in our newsroom? And except for hyper-partisan people on both sides who are constantly looking for something, and when you look for it that hard, you find it, most people will tell you, nope, the Tribune is pretty fair. Dan Patrick once told me, the Lieutenant Governor of Texas, most conservative statewide elected official in the world, his end of the world politically has not been particularly enamored of the media. It is the conservatives in this state who, more than the liberals in the state, believe that the media is biased. I think the Tribune is fair 90% of the time. I said, shit, Ty Cobb only hit 400. He was the best there ever was. 90% is pretty good. I think that we do the very best job that I've seen of any news organization at staying out of areas that we should not be in. And I think we have managed to be unbiased. For a lot of people, nonpartisan journalism is like jumbo shrimp. It's an oxymoron. But from my perspective, I think it's entirely possible you just never go into it any other way.
Thanks.
Ma'am.
Hi, what gave you the idea to start a nonprofit newspaper, and how long did it take to start it up?
So in some ways, the decision was not made by us. It was made by other people not succeeding at what they were doing. You know, the fact is, if the for-profit news media had been able to produce this kind of content on public policy and politics and state government and make enough money at doing it that they would keep doing it, we may never have come along. We were addressing a market failure, and we were trying to meet a demand that we believed was out there, and we certainly were trying to rectify a supply problem. Nonprofit was our alternative to the existing order, which was not working. And the argument that we made, and I think it's still legitimate, maybe ever more legitimate today, is that the kind of work we do performs a public service. It's in the public's interest. And so, in the same way that other nonprofits exist and do work in the public interest, and as a result raise money in a way and from a kind of people who support things that benefit the community, we were able to go make that case to the IRS that we deserve to be a nonprofit, a 501c3, allow us to raise money from individuals, foundations, and corporations, and to have those contributions be tax exempt in the same way that when you give to another community organization, charity, or public service organization, it's the same. You know, I think that we are a nonprofit in the way that we approach this work. Our public service mission is the thing that drives us, and so that was the reason we did it. It took us probably 18 months of conversation, maybe 6 to 9 months of real work on the ground. I announced I was leaving Texas Monthly the middle of July of '09. I actually left at the end of August. On a Friday, I started with the Tribune on a Monday. We opened the office on September 1st of '09. We launched the Tribune on November 3rd of '09. 17 full-time, 11 reporters. We built the website, depending upon who you talk to, in either 9 weeks or 3 weeks. And one of the tricks about this business is that you can do things quickly and get them published or posted. And it's okay if they're not perfect. The world we live in journalistically these days is inherently iterative. When I was in the magazine business and we would do a magazine every 30 days and send it to the printer, ink on paper, when we sent something to be published, it was done. Now when we publish something, it's just beginning, because that's where the work really begins. Revision, update, iteration. So we got the website up on the November 3rd of '09. It was not perfect. But we thought, let's get it going, and then let's backfill and let's iterate and let's improve and revise as we go. I think we're still doing that 6 years later. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you. I do love this school. You are lucky to be here. This school does not get the attention out in the world that UT or A&M gets. Those are big brands. They got a lot of money to spend. You guys are a jewel down here in San Marcos. I don't know that you fully appreciate how good you have it or how good the school is, but all of us out in the world increasingly do. I hope you'll come think about interning for us, and I wish you all good luck. Thanks very much. You did a very good job. I appreciate it.